How do you stay sane while trying to homeschool and work at the same time? The ironic thing is that I have 3 kids that have been homeschooled since before this. And
Oh my goodness. Wow.
my partner, my wife, is a saint. She's the one who kind of heads up that piece of it, and I'm usually out
She could
running
give us
around.
tips.
Yeah. I think the answer is it's just you kind of like set a framework in place, but sometimes you just gotta mix it up. I think the sanity piece of it. I had a call earlier last week actually with the agents and brokers interest group, and we were talking about just really quickly like what constitutes an essential business. And I just made the off the cuff joke that at first I thought liquor stores being called an essential business was a joke. It was comedic, and I said now I kind of see it might actually be that they are an essential business here the longer this goes on. But yeah, it's just a matter of like kind of self-care. I think the one thing that I'm probably going to learn from this is that before everything happened, I didn't do a very good job of, kind of like drawing that line and being like, okay, I'm on the clock, I'm off the clock. It was, email responses at midnight. It was, taking calls at the dinner table. This situation has kind of given me a good frame of reference to look back and say, all right, what constitutes a healthy work-life balance when you're remote 100% of the time? And I think a lot of people are going to go through that because they're going to go through the first part, which is just basically the deluge of thinking you have to be on the clock all the time. And then the understanding that there's a component of having to take care of yourself. I have not watched Tiger King. I'm not like huge interested in Tiger King. I can tell you I've been watching with my wife Outlander. It's based off of a romance novel series. So there's that. So there's some adult content in there, but yeah, that's pretty much what we've been doing for sanity is just watching a couple of TV series and then taking walks every day.
Awesome.
What about you, Amy?
Well, I don't know. Sanity is not my particular strength. I love Deidre's acronym of goal, routine, outreach, and wellness. And I'm really good at goal. Like I'm so good at goal that I lose track of all that other stuff. But like for us, so I'm the mom that got the call from each teacher saying, your kid hasn't turned in any homework. I'm like, well, I told him to do it. Why isn't he like I asked him on Monday if he had his stuff done and he said, yeah. So I assumed he was telling me the truth. Right. So, cause I get so focused on my own stuff. And then yesterday I had a conversation with the same kids. So my kids are 17, 11, and 4. And the 11-year-old's the only one in school right now. The 17-year-old's already graduated. But the 11-year-old, he was talking to me about how I'm a workaholic. And I could feel my back like tighten, right? I'm like, when he's talking to me, and I said, okay, I said, honey, I need you to understand. It's expensive to have a family of 5. And I'm running my own business and I've got all this stuff. And I was like, and I'm stressed AF. And he kind of looked at me and I said, but I'm trying not to show it. The one thing I can control is how much work do I get done in a day. So that's what I'm focused on. And he's like, got it. And I think I freaked him out a little bit, but I'm like, he needs to know that this is not like, this isn't easy for grownups either. And I don't want to put him in a place where he feels like like the earth is unsteady, right, underneath him any more than it already is, or any more than it already feels. But at the same time, like he needs to know, like, mom struggles too, and I'm working my way through it, and this is my process. And, maybe all the homework won't get done. It's okay. Maybe, the house is not clean. I got a 4-year-old. Every single thing that I've ever organized is now on the floor of my living room because, well, I'm going to play with that for a minute. Right? Like she walks in naked all the time while I'm on calls. I'm like, I got nothing. Right. But then like on Saturdays, like we'll go out in the woods and hunt mushrooms and like, like fun stuff like that. So, we try, right. And then my husband's working from home for the first time ever. And so that's an interesting bit, right? Cause like, if I don't get the right kind of juice in the sippy cup, she goes downstairs to tattle on me to tell daddy that, but I want it. So, you know, we're trying really hard to like, you know, how can we ease each other's load? How can we kind of, you know, pick up, like he took the kids just now to the garden he's got a community garden plot. And he's like, I'm just going to let them go run and play in dirt. I said, great. And I'll give them a bath when they get home and you can go hide and it'll be fine. But, you know, it's just, I think it's incumbent upon all of us to just say, okay, what can I do? What can I control? Where can I put my focus that makes me feel good and whole? And for all those things that I can't control, I have to limit the time that I spend thinking about, worrying about, or talking about those things. And one of the things that I started doing a couple weeks ago, I've been writing this book for like 2 years called Moving from Panic to Purpose. And I started doing videos. I put together back in January, I put a workbook out because I wanted to have something to show for all the work that I've been doing on this book. And I decided, you know, instead of like focusing on just writing the book, I'm going to go through this workbook as I'm actually experiencing this change and sharing with people my process, because maybe it'll help them. And so, you know, it starts with acknowledging your feelings and, you know, and then it kind of all stems from that. Right. But I need to work, Deidre, I don't know if you heard when you were coming back on, but I need to work on the routine and the outreach and the wellness piece because I can feel myself, like I'm trying hard, like not to drink more and not to eat more,
girl,
move a little bit. But I'm telling you, it's hard. Like the first week of the pandemic, I realized that bottle of tequila that I've been nursing for like 15 years, like literally 15 years, I've had this bottle of tequila because I'll drink like this much at a time in a margarita. I emptied it and I panicked. I was like, I gotta go to the liquor store right now. And I'll have like a margarita once a week or twice a week. And I'm like, because what I really want is a Mexican restaurant margarita, but you can't get those right now. Carry out a margarita. They need to change that law, by the way. I want my carry out margaritas.
At least if you're in California, you would have that, honey. So
I gotta move then.
A lot of other stuff going on too.
Talk about business resiliency. My hometown has a ton of colleges, so there's a lot of college bars. So one of the ways that the bars are trying to stay open is they're selling mixed drink kits. So if you lived here, you could get a margarita that's like just add ice kind of situation. Yep.
Very cool. Yeah,
we went to North Carolina. Nothing like
that. We just last year started to be able to buy beer and liquor on Sundays in Indiana. Because up until last year we had blue laws, so thank goodness that happened before this. But I digress. And I, you know, try not to have a drink before dinner, but some days. But I'd love to hear from Deidre because I know she's got kids at home too. Like, how are you staying sane? To extend on Bobbie's question, and then I'll let Bobbie take back over.
Yeah. Well, thank you for your patience because I know I kind of one way I've been staying sane is like I just know this is not normal. So why is my ego allowing me to try to be in control of a situation I can control? Like I think to your point, like I can control myself and how I react to something, but me trying to make things perfect and be a Pinterest mom and then like a LinkedIn executive, I'm not gonna look like that right now, and that's okay. And I don't want to be who I was before this pandemic. Transparently, I work too hard. Like I would spend time on LinkedIn on the weekends or just on my phone, just being there for everybody else besides myself and for my kids and for my son. And I say that because I was physically there, but I wasn't present. And I don't want to be that person anymore. And I say that because it's hard to admit, like things were broken before. They're not necessarily broken now. It's just a great awakening that we're all getting reset right now. But it has been challenging. I am not a teacher. Like I'm great at, I can speak at events. I can inspire people. For some reason, I can't inspire my son to think I have enough authority to listen to me when I teach him math because that's not the new math. I'm like, well, this old math got me this far in life. So we're going to have to figure out a happy medium. And then also some things I just know I'm good at. I'm good at least having structure. He's going to be loved. I'm going to do the best I can do, but I can't do it all. For example, he goes to a Chinese immersion school. I don't think I'm going to really learn. I guess we're going to learn Chinese together, but I just know that certain things I can't do. So how I stay sane is, one, every morning and before that, I start with gratitude. I express what I'm thankful for. So I find that gratitude grounds me, like, thank God I have, this the internet. I mean, that sounds like something we take for granted, but a lot of people just don't, because they're losing jobs and they can't pay those bills or figure it out. And they're cut off from all kinds of opportunities. I'm so thankful that we're going through a pandemic. They're in the 21st century. I mean, I wouldn't want to go through this back in the past where it's like, you can't go outside. You're going to either die or can't get a job or do anything. And then once I get past the gratitude, I try to have some kind of connection point, with my son and make it fun, because we're used to rushing in the morning and doing that stuff. And then I have clear boundaries. Like, I'm done doing work or anything at a certain time. And then and so I say that because it's basically a rant, but I realized things were broken and I'm okay to divorce myself from the past, but I'm trying to set myself up for the future of, like, who do I want to be going forward, and let that guide me. And that keeps me grounded and keeps me sane, because I realize I'm not saying it, but it's okay. But it's also, I know for me, everyone has challenges. I mean, we all have stories and all have things that we had to go through. And so my perspective shifted after going through enough challenges. I'm like, and I'm spiritual, and I'm like, I believe that God never gives me a setback, but I have to come up. There's something that I'm going to gain from this. And I always kind of drive with that. And it's like, okay, this is really, what kind of lesson am I going to learn from this? Because this one's a hard one and it's hurting right now. So I'm waiting to see where it's taking me. And that what kind of drives me. But at the same time, I try to be of service to people, because, part of like why I started my business full time, I got laid off in December. And, that was kind of challenging. I'm like, okay, at least I have my side hustle. Let me take that forward and do something with this. But at the same time, I mean, being sensitive to people, I'm like, how can I use my skill set to be of service to people? Help coach them on how to be more able to work remotely, help people with their personal brands, and not really translating to money necessarily. Hopefully they're on that relationship will build, but I'm using my services to help people out, and that makes me feel better. So I bet for a lot of you guys, I mean, Bobbie, I see you on Twitter all the time sharing information for free that's empowering for folks and making them feel grounded. I know, Matthew, I've just met you now, but I've seen a lot of your LinkedIn posts, and Amy, and that knowledge is power. So I think if nothing else, and my question I was going to ask to the group is, how do you think people in the risk management space are rising up right now as thought leaders? Because if no other time more than now, risk management should be seen as valuable, when it used to be seen as a cost center or expense to companies. Now is the time to shine. How are you seeing, or are you seeing risk managers shining it? And if not, what are your tips for how they can shine right now within their company and outside the company?
I can jump in on that one first. I think you're seeing a lot of risk managers. What's interesting about someone who's in the retail, the client facing part of this industry, is what the product that you sell isn't apparent. Its value isn't apparent, or your service, the value of your service isn't necessarily always apparent until something like this happens, right? It's the hand holding, it's the professional guidance. I think you're seeing a lot of folks that did kind of do business in the old world environment, either stuck or having to, transition to more of this, digital sharing of thought leadership and expertise. I think a lot of people, the old mindset used to be like, why give something away for free when you can charge for it, right? I think that mentality is completely out the window, because there's so much good information out there for free nowadays that, the cream rises, so to speak, right? So you're going to give out that 95% of your stuff for free. It's that extra 5% that's the real value, right? But that's not unlike what used to happen before, right? What used to happen before was, if I'm getting the same 95% I can get from anyone else, how do you differentiate yourself, right? It's that extra 5%. That's what you get paid for. So I think it's different, but it's also the same. So I've really tried to do a lot more like this, where it's more kind of personalizing. We've talked a lot about, and you probably heard my dog bark a couple of times in the background. We've talked about the humanizing aspect of, what being thrust into remote work has kind of brought into the equation. And it also comes into that work-life balance. You know, I feel closer with people having seen their homes in the background and having met their animals and seen their children and heard them and things like that, more so than the kind of like buttoned up corporate America, you know, tie at the water jug or at the, you know, the coffee break room kind of relationship that I had with them before. And I think it's a positive. It's going to take some time to truly understand how we're going to like navigate that from a risk management side, because look, immediately you saw it with Zoom and other online, I mean, Zoom gets picked on because they have the majority of the market share, but other online meeting platforms, hacks and things like that, people saying awful stuff in chat when it wasn't password protected and things like that. There's all those risk management considerations that have to be put into place. But, you know, the digital world is a completely different animal than what used to be the kind of like knock on the door sales and risk management approach to things. So yeah, I think that's kind of my meandering 2 cents about it. I mean, what have you seen, Amy? Have you seen kind of like an uptick in, I know there's an uptick in the volume, but what about the quality of the stuff that's been put out there?
Well, you know, I think this is a really good opportunity for the insurance industry in a lot of ways, because, you know, like you have the story like what happened with Wimbledon, right? They were paying like $2 million a year in pandemic insurance. I mean, it's very specific, right? You exclude pandemics, you exclude infectious disease from your coverage because it's hard to underwrite. Somebody counseled them very well and said, look, $2 million a year is a lot of money, but what's going to happen if you don't do it? They paid that for what, 15 years or 20 years, something like that. They got $140 million payout this year because they couldn't hold Wimbledon. That was a great investment. Mm-hmm. Now you've got all these people, right? I know New Jersey is having this problem where you've got all these folks that are basically saying, well, the insurance company should pay out for the pandemic. And like insurance companies are sitting on piles of cash that they don't have a use for. Yeah. And I think it's unfortunate that we have to spend so much time educating the public on the reason insurance companies are sitting on piles of cash is because they're going to have to use those piles of cash to pay claims that they did take into account when they wrote your policy. Yep. Right. Yep. And if we bankrupt insurance companies now, there will be no economic recovery because you can't buy a house or a car or start a business or hire people unless you've got insurance backing you. Yeah. And so, you know, I was having the conversation with someone this morning and I said, I really want people, I know individual people can be very short-sighted about what insurance does and what it's for, but we really need to call on our community leaders, on the politicians, on our legislators to say, look, you've got to take a long-term view of this thing. Because if you want people to be able to invest when this is all over, the insurance companies have to remain solvent. They wrote their policies based on the math that they had. They excluded this on purpose because, you know, it was a hard risk to mitigate against in mass, right? You can do like this one or this one. But it's the same thing with earthquakes, right? You exclude earthquakes, and then if people want earthquake coverage, they have to write it back in. They have to pay extra for that because that could devastate an entire community. Well, here we are. Yeah. And so, you know, I think there's a good opportunity for us in the insurance industry to say, look, this is the value of having a good relationship with your agent, of sitting down and understanding your policy and what's in and what's out before you sign over, your premium dollars. This is why you want to insure with a reputable company that's going to be around. This is why you want to, you know, renew your coverage every year. Sorry about my dog. These are the reasons we in the insurance industry exist, to protect people from events that, you know, they can't control. And unfortunately, I think there's a little bit too much misdirected anger at the industry right now. I can certainly think of 1,000 other places for that anger to go. But you know.
I can tell you anecdotally. So without being too specific and calling anyone out individually, a good portion of my book of business is public sector business in New Jersey. And this is not germane to just New Jersey public sector. I think it's pretty much most public sector organizations throughout the country, maybe even throughout the world, money typically isn't set aside and always honored for what it's set aside for. Okay, so I'll give you a perfect example. A lot of the municipalities throughout the country are self-insured to a certain extent. They have some kind of retention, meaning a big front-end deductible, right? $250,000, $500,000, because they have such a big cash flow every single year that they can manage paying those claims and those pieces of those claims, and it offsets the overall cost of the insurance every year. My recommendation to them is always, one, have an actuary look at it so that they're not hit with some kind of deluge of claims that they didn't anticipate, which causes a shortage in the budget. And the second piece of it is to build a reserve. Okay, I think there's only, like, I can count the number on one hand of all of the clients that have actually enacted the reserve and honored the reserve. Okay, the reserve a lot of times within the public sector is, okay, this is a strategic reserve, and even though originally we had thought of it, to use it for this one piece, we need to push it now to, something else that's of dire need. And I don't hold that against them. I mean, that's the nature of public sector budgeting and funding. They're on a year-to-year basis. Insurance companies aren't like that. Insurance claims aren't like that, right? You brought up the idea of like earthquake and things like that. Those are single hit kind of, and we lost Bobbie. I would love to hear her take on it because she's more on that claim side. But like an earthquake or a hurricane or something is a single hit in time, one big loss. You also have liability. Like, business interruption is not one day of lost revenue. It's a month or 6 months or 12 months. One of my clients at the time was an entertainment venue on the Jersey Shore that was out for 6 months. Their yearly revenue was on the order of $20 million. Okay. So for 12 months of loss, they're out $20 million. Even on a net income basis, you're still talking about, 6, 7, 8 figures in payout. You can't just say that, okay, all this money over here that was meant for these claims, we're going to pay these claims with it. Like, that's not going to work. I would really love some more diversity of thought on the public sector side, bringing in more insurance professionals to kind of talk about this. And it's kind of off topic, but I think health insurance is a perfect example of it too. Like, you need people that understand the mechanism of how the industry works to really give good advice. And like, they shouldn't be demonizing insurance. Insurance is like one of the 3 pillars of civilized world, right? Civilized world is, banking, it's government, and it's insurance. Like, those are the 3 things. If you have those 3 things, you can actually create some level of organization. But yeah, I'll get off my soapbox, but that's a big take home here is, the industry that's actually trying to help in a lot of these cases, like, don't demonize it. We're here to make things better, not to sail away on our pile of money like Scrooge McDuck while everyone suffers. Like, that's just not the way it goes.
I don't know any claims person ever. I have never met a claims person who took any delight in denying a claim.
Oh yeah. No,
like, I mean,
they have that stamp. They just run around with the stamp, right? Denied, right?
I know. It's, yeah, because you see the insurance or the local, lawyer commercials, like the insurance.
Oh yeah,
big bad guys, right? And I get that, but I don't know anybody who has ever taken pleasure in denying a valid claim. They're doing that because they have to, right? That's how the policy was written, or that's what the person decided to pay for, right?
Yeah.
You can't get mad that you've got $1,000 deductible when you have the accident because it saved you premium up front. Like, that doesn't work.
Right.
But anyway,
yeah.
But one thing I wanted to ask you guys is, and Deidre, you kind of alluded to this, right? Like, we don't want to get back to the old normal because the old normal was maybe not so great in some cases, right? Like, we're overworked, we're overstressed for this. And now, of course, we're all more overworked and more overstressed. But really, like, right now sucks.
Yeah.
There. And we're all sitting here from a place of incredible privilege, right? We're all healthy. We all have our homes. We all have, like, our families are healthy. Like, we're all, my microwave broke down. That was the biggest problem I had this week. So, like, I get that I'm sitting here going, okay, well, this really sucks. And yet it really doesn't suck all that bad compared to 99% of the world right now. But where I was going with that is, if we don't get back to the old normal, what are the opportunities for the new normal that we could elevate what it means to work in insurance, what it means to work remotely, what it means to, to be a society that's gone through this sort of shared traumatic experience?
I will say some things I thought about, like from like a business or a company or just leadership perspective. I think the solutions are pretty, simple. They're just not being utilized, like feedback loops. Having strong feedback loops and actually listening to feedback. Like some of these solutions could have been, seen years ago. Like, hey, I need more flexibility with work-life balance. I just need to be able, that's not rocket science, but what are the feedback loops and how seriously are you taking that feedback when it comes to things? People talk about, some on the diversity side, diversity recruitment. Well, it's not aspects. It's like, are you hiring people remotely? Because some of these jobs, actually a lot of these jobs are realizing can be done from home.
I love hearing you say that, because as somebody who was told repeatedly, well, you have to work in this city to get this job with this company, when I knew that I could do it from wherever I sat, drove me crazy. And I was thinking, if you're only looking in one city for the talent that you need for this role, you are missing out on a lot of people that could do that work.
But so that's one thing. It's like recruitment. It's like, do you need someone, like, for example, I live in the Bay Area. It's like one of the most expensive places in the world. And a lot of us natives are leaving because we can't afford to be where we grew up. And it's like, do you need someone to work for these tech companies when they have technology locally? Because you're not aren't training the people locally for the skills in their public schools. You're not hiring people from Oakland or the town to do these jobs. So why do they have to be here? So why don't you hire someone from the Midwest or the South to do the same job? And part of the equation people are talking about is income equality, as well as different abilities. Some of the feedback I've been hearing and blind spots I saw is that a lot of people in disability community are saying, like, for years we asked and advocated for more access to things. Having some, whether you have competence, make it a digital aspect of it so we can participate. Whether it's physical abilities or just mental, hey, I have a lot of migraines or whatever, like maybe I need to work from home or figure things out. Why were they ignored for years? Why does it take for fully able people like me to go through something where we can't work somewhere physically is it be available for all people? So that's what it's eye-opening, but at the same time it makes me kind of angry. I'm like, this whole population, it's a lot of people who, whether they are born that way or over time you have an issue or something comes up and you're like, whether it's temporary or whatever, I can't fully function. Why should I be outside of society, not brought into work or whatever? So I just think, feedback loops. Also, what are some solutions we can start applying to make things more accessible or equitable? And then hopefully putting our money where our mouth is. Right now, I've been evaluating personal relationships, business relationships, based on how people are responding to this. So ones with tone-deaf communications, and people come to me like business as usual, asking, where is X, Y, and Z, but you didn't ask about my welfare. I'm sorry, I don't want to do business with you. And I'm not going to even say it in a way that's going to, protect your ego. Hey, for the last couple of follow-ups, you did not even ask me, how am I doing? For that reason, I'm going to, stop this relationship, and I wish you success, but we are not aligned on our values. And going forward, I refuse to partner with a business or company or pay for a business that does not value their employees or me enough to ask me, one, how are you doing, and then go to business. That's simple, but that just shows me that you're not the one, and there's somebody else who's probably better aligned to work with you or for you.
No, I think that makes a ton of sense. I think there's no excuse anymore for a company to not be diverse and inclusive, right? I mean, there was no excuse before this, right? But with kind of a push in that direction of being more technology based and more kind of like spread out and remote work and whatnot, you have no excuse anymore, right? Like, so it used to be that, oh, well, I'm going to put a pin in the map, and then, the people I'm going to look for within, a 15, 20 mile radius of where I'm at, or a 50-mile radius. Now, like, it's international. What's interesting is the accounting and the HR laws and things like that are also going to have to shift tectonically as a result of this, right? So, I mean, we're just on the verge of this, and it took this crisis to really kind of like make the train go off the cliff, so to speak, right? Like, so we've been on the verge of this for a long time, but you have absolutely no excuse to not have a diverse and inclusive workforce anymore. To your point, Deidre, like, that is like a story as old as time, right? Like, I come from a place of privilege to say this, but how many times has it been that it's like, the person who has Caucasians, who's Caucasian and has a good position has to suffer for something to change, whereas other folks have been suffering through the same thing for, how many years? Like, that's exactly the point. I do a lot of just kind of like personal, I should really write more about it, but I do a lot of personal thinking. And if you want to listen to a dynamite podcast, Revisionist History is a fantastic podcast. There's a lot of elements in there of what does it take for someone to actually change, right? We get these hardwired practices, these hardwired thoughts. It's why we think everyone has to show up to the office and work from 9 to 5 when you're like, look, I've been working from home for 2.5 weeks and I get as much done in 2.5 hours as I used to in an 8-hour workday, right? You get these hardwired processes or habits that get put into place, and it's very difficult to change. And the question is, all right, under what circumstances does change actually happen? Does it have to be a global pandemic for it to change? One of the questions actually asked, it was either on that or it was on, I also listen to Freakonomics Radio. One of the questions had to do with, like, concussions in the NFL. And regardless of whether or not you're an NFL fan, which, by the way, I'm jonesing like crazy to see whether or not there's actually going to be a football season. But, the idea of concussions in the NFL, at what point in time was enough evidence to make change, right? And we come to find out that there was this avalanche of evidence that just didn't cause change until some stars aligned and actually, caused them to start taking some steps. And unfortunately, it had to be a financial consideration before they actually decided to really be proactive about it. But the same can be true about D&I in what this world's going to look like after, the all clear is sounded. I'm also really concerned that a lot of folks are going to rush to be, to open up the borders in terms of whoever they're hiring, and they're going to do a very crappy job of it. And you're going to see a lot of those tone deaf emails and a lot of those, those emails that have, like, those inside buddy jokes in them. And someone who doesn't live in wherever, 90% of your workforce is, gets that email and is like, they're offended because that's just not culturally appropriate. I mean, just think of someone, not to call anyone out, but like, think of like a company in rural Georgia that now hires like a highly liberal person from New York City. Okay. When they communicate, what's that going to look like in 6 months or 12 months? Right. I mean, they should have been thinking about that now, but that's going to be even more of an issue come, in the years to come. So it's going to be interesting. It's, risk managers are also going to have to take more of a approach of really kind of thinking through these business models with their clients and saying, look, we really need to kick the tires on a bunch of different angles here. And if you really do want to branch out and embrace this, we have to do it responsibly. We can't just do it to say that we're doing it.
Yeah. One thing I'd like to see, one thing that's becoming clear in the way different countries are handling the pandemic is that we're seeing a lot of countries with strong women in leadership roles handling this very well, very humanely, very methodically and very effectively. And I would love it if we were able to use this while it's a horrible situation, if we were able to use this as a case study, because a lot of times women are put in leadership roles when they're set up to fail because things have been going so bad. Well, we might as well let a woman try, right? And this is true for other marginalized groups as well, right? So not just women, but usually white women, especially in corporate America, we'll let a woman try it and see if she can do it. And then she doesn't fix everything that was broken. So she's failed, right? Well, now we've got in this kind of on the world stage, we have some powerful women in positions where they did not inherit a crisis. A crisis came to their doorstep and they dealt with it. And they dealt with it very well. And I'm hopeful that we can take a look at this, from a historical lens at some point and say, look, the nature of leadership has got to change. The way we think about what strong leaders look like has got to change. And we need a more inclusive definition of strong leadership, because strong leadership is coming from women in Africa, women in Asia, women in Europe, right? We're looking at different models of how we assess our humanity and how we prioritize caring over dollars, and with good results, right, in the mix. And so that's something that I would like to see us, see kind of teased out of the data of this when it's all over, is what does that look like and what lessons can we learn in business based on what's happening globally?
I agree. And I think a part of it is data. Okay. While we're going through this, we have the experts collecting data, because none of that's something they've been asking with the whole public health experience, and how are people, different populations being impacted by this. It's very important we start collecting data for the purpose of studying later, because right now we're going through it. We might not have either the resources or time to really delve deep right now, but eventually we want to learn from this, right, and be better as individuals, societies. So it's like, at least let's start collecting the data. And then once the dust settles, we can be like, okay, what's best practices and lesson learned and things we should not repeat? Because I think a lot of times people are so in the moment, and then they have amnesia when things are good. And then we repeat this whole process over again. It's like, maybe we just have to go through a pandemic for y'all to realize, like, people should work remotely, or people should invest in healthcare, preventive healthcare. It's actually cheaper and better for society. But for some reason, we either have amnesia or willful ignorance on stuff. And it sounds bad, but I don't know. And it's just people who want to see certain things will see it. That's why it's really important to have inclusive leadership. I was watching World Z, the zombie movie with Brad Pitt, and then I've been watching a lot of zombie movies in the world movies. They make me feel better. That's how I keep my sanity. I watch all the different scary movies about the world ending and aliens. But in one of the scenes, it was a guy, and they're like in, I don't know, Middle East, whatever. And they're like, how come y'all start preparing for this before everybody else? Like, you start building this wall. And it's like, one rule we implemented is that if everyone agrees on something, we pick someone to disagree and have to tell us why the opposite is true. And I was like, that's very profound. Like, I mean, you get inspired. And I'm like, hopefully going forward, we have that person in the room say, I'm going to be the one disagreeing, and I'm going to be strongly about this, and let's figure out the opposite. If the opposite is true, what are we going to do to mitigate this risk? And I think that's the point where it's like, okay, society has shown that there's mostly been men in leadership. Let's say all the men go away. How are we going to operate? How do we help successfully train people to be, and it's not that it's anti-man, it's more like, hey, let's say chain of command, everyone's gone, what are we going to do to survive? And I think that we have to have, everyone's a risk manager in your personal, professional life. And one thing that's been giving me comfort is coming from risk management family. We've been having our personal risk management meetings every week on Sundays, in which we've been tracking it for a month and a half now. My mom, who's been a risk manager for 40 plus years, so we just come and talk about what's going on, different locations that we live in, track and see what's going on. And I say that because there were some people and, family who didn't want to come out there all like, this is doom and gloom. I'm like, it's preparation. And actually it's better to be aware of things we don't, and then, and then go and think, worst case scenario, do we have all the supplies we need? Will we all be safe? Will we be able to communicate? And if things happen to be good, that's fine. But I say that because in our personal, professional, and all kind of lives, we can manage risk, and that can help serve our community and businesses. And I hope going forward, we learn lessons and share best practices and own our responsibilities as risk managers, leaders, and even in healthcare. Like, I have to manage and own that in my son's education more. And it's okay to own these things because it empowers us as a society to not disvalue or unvalue roles, but also step up individually to help bring up society. Where before, I will just say, I'm like, that's not my job, but my job is to do everything inside of my job and outside of my job and support my community.
I think you raise a fantastic point, Deidre. You need someone who's not the fly in the ointment, but the person that forces everyone to justify what the decision is, right? So if you have everyone who's pointed in one direction in the room, you're going to get a bad decision because no one's actually holding anyone to task to figure out why, it is a good idea, or to figure out whether or not there's a better idea, right? That's why diversity and inclusion is so pivotal to really highly productive teams. You need that person who comes at, the problem or the project from a slightly different angle so that they can look at things and say, wait, hold on, we got an issue here that we might need to kind of like mix it up, or have we tried this? I'm a big proponent of, and Amy, to your point, I'm a big proponent of the fact that the world needs, like, it's very yin and yang. The world needs light and it needs dark, right? The world needs male and it needs female perspective or transgendered perspective, right? It needs, pick whatever the juxtaposition is, okay? Democrats and Republicans, right? As much as you might hate the other side, you need the other side, right? Because you need them to kind of like ping pong back and forth. I'm also someone, this isn't always a popular view, but I'm of the viewpoint that if you think the correct answer, and remember, I come from like an engineering background, science, I have an undergraduate degree in biomedical engineering. If you think the answer is all the way this or all the way that, you're wrong, right? Because there's an entire spectrum along the middle, and that those two extreme answers are such an infinitesimal amount of the potential answers that there's no way that you're right. You're almost always completely wrong. So you need that kind of like push and pull on either side. I'm really interested, I'm hopeful. Yeah, thank you. The dog's barking. I'm really hopeful that the narrative after this doesn't undercut the successful leadership of the women that have been in place and just said that they were riding on someone's coattails or whatever, right? Like the people that are going to come out of this as the best leaders legitimately saw this as a tough situation that we were going to have to deal with, and they proactively dealt with it. The people that stuck their head in the sand, they should history should really show them out as folks that, they just didn't have the forthright nature to be able to lead. They were, when times were good, everyone looks like a good leader, right? And to your point, Amy, it's always like, you're right. Like the female CEO is always given the sinking ship. And then when the ship actually sinks, you go, see, like, we can't give women leadership potential. It's like, it's always going to blow up in their face. And you can, input any subgroup in there, and the exact same situation, you set someone up to fail, and all of a sudden that becomes the justification for not giving them another shot. It's complete, it's self-reinforcing delusion is basically what it is. But I really want to see a much higher level of diversity.
I think one of the places that we've seen really good, really strong leadership is in the governors in our states. We're seeing diversity of governors across this country, right? All across the political spectrum, different genders, different races and ethnicities, different backgrounds, right? Some business backgrounds, some political backgrounds, some nonprofit backgrounds. We have seen a lot of leadership from these governors where they have stepped up and done the right thing because they're held very accountable to the group of people that they got to look at every day, right? And I think there's a lot of lesson in that for us as leaders in the corporate space. When you have real accountability to people, when people are looking at you and saying, but what are you doing about this? There's nowhere to hide.
Yeah.
right? You can't blame it on somebody else. You can't blame it, you can't blame circumstances. You can't say, well, we're waiting for, right? All these governors have stepped up and said, look, I mean, not all of them, but almost all of them, a good number out of 50 have said, I'm here to serve the people of my state, and that is what I'm going to do. And now you're starting to see these coalitions of governors in different places, right? Like I know in the Northeast, there's kind of this coalition of governors, New York, New Jersey, around in there. I know like Washington, Oregon, California, the governors there are meeting together. Here in the Midwest, we've got, Indiana, Ohio, and Kentucky have kind of formed a sort of a regional coalition, how they're dealing with this stuff. And there's a lot of give and take between the states right now. And I think that's a great model because it's, there's sort of this diffused responsibility, right? It's not, these governors are not working in hierarchy with each other, right? They've all got sort of this level playing field. Some states have more resources than others, but they all have different resources that they're working with, but they're able to say, look, my state's really good at X, yours is really good at Y. We've got a break right now. We can help you with this. You can help us when the tides turn, that sort of thing. And I really think that there's a lot to be learned there. And I think if we can focus on the lessons of who's doing this right, who's doing well, who really stepped up into, what could arguably be called a void of leadership, or at least maybe not a coordinated leadership effort, right? I think there's a lot for us to learn in our organizations. And I think there's a lot to be learned about, diversity of perspectives in these roles. But Deidre,
I would agree. I mean, and I'll say this because it's funny because, not funny, but, we talk about diversity, inclusion. You hear about things, it's like about Black history, women's history, because it's all happening around that area, that time, right? And I'm like, all stuff is history. And I say that because if not the first city, it was one of the first to have shelter in place was San Francisco. And he was leading it, the first Black female mayor of the city in the history, local native, there's a lot of displaced people in the Bay Area, but local, and at the risk of being the, this person who's different, who, doesn't have a long history in politics, but is someone who loves her city. She's like, what, I want to protect my people. I'm shutting this down. And, San Francisco, big economy, a lot of tech companies, a lot of things going on. But she's like, what, at the risk of y'all hating on me, I'm shutting this down to protect my people. And we see the ripple effect. And then eventually more cities in the Bay Area. And then Gavin Newsom was like, shut the whole state down. And all it just takes is someone willing to step up for their people and be like, I don't care what you think. I want to protect my people. And sometimes you're not liked, but in the end, we realized it was a better thing. That's why, things are better off in our area when it comes to, bending the curve and whatever. But I just say that I hope if nothing else, we're all inspired to speak up and make those tough decisions. Because leadership is not about being a yes person, calling those tough shots when you have to be the no person, or, and it's not popular, and I hope that we all can have that bravery in our lives as professionals and people just in our community say, what, like, the pastors, you're like, I love my church, but we're going to have to be digital now. And that's a big thing for a lot of people, especially in certain areas, to step up and say, we're not going to meet in person. And, there was a lot of issues with that. And I say that because bravery is really where leadership is coming from right now. We hope we're all inspired to be brave in our different platforms.
Thank you, Deidre, so much. I'm going to let you, we're going to end there because I think that's just the perfect note to end on.
Awesome.
Matthew, and to Bobbie, who had to cut out a little bit ago. Thank you all so much for being here, for having this conversation. And, I'll make sure you have the link so that you can share it out. But I've enjoyed this so much. This gives me hope and it makes me feel more connected. And I just appreciate you all so much.
Thank you. I appreciate talking with all of y'all.
Yeah, we're going to have to do this again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Bye.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.